Well, welcome everyone to the Dashboard Dojo. Today we're going to talk about reporting in Salesforce, the Nonprofit Success Pack Part 2. We're so thrilled to have Daniel Gorton with us again. Daniel did a session reporting in Salesforce NPSP 101 back in February this year. And during that session, we talked about having him back. So we're thrilled to have him with us. He and I were just out at Dreamforce together a couple weeks back, which was a lot of fun. So today in the dojo, we're going to just do a quick introduction of ourselves. We'll ask any of you that'd like to come off mute and share what NPSP reporting goals that you have or what you're working on. It'd be great to hear. We're going to dive into, I guess I've left the Waza and Shiai. The bulk of today will be a discussion with Daniel. And then we'll show off a couple of things that I think are really just useful for any report writer, but certainly within the data model of the Success Pack. We'll talk about upcoming dojo topics. We have, I think, 4 or 5 more scheduled before the end of the year, which will be fun. We'll talk about some upcoming training. I'm back training next week with a 5-day admin class, then a couple of weeks later with a 2-day hands-on report and dashboard workshop. We'll certainly have time for Q&A. This does not need to be formal. I'm so glad that you're all here, and why don't we go ahead and get started. So welcome, Daniel. Daniel is the Salesforce Solution Architect for City Year. He's just gone through a massive migration, which he might share with you today. I'm so thrilled for Daniel. He has 10 Salesforce certs. He's an application architect, and he's also the Boston Salesforce Saturday co-leader. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
My name is David Carnes. I'm the chairman and chief evangelist of OpFocus. We're a 50+ person, I think I heard 56 yesterday, person consulting shop based in the US and Canada. We work with SaaS companies to optimize their revenue operations and their go-to-market tech stack. We also have Kyle Shagnon acting as our host. Thank you, Kyle.
Happy to be here.
Okay, great. Why don't we dive in? So for any of you that have joined the call, it'd be great to hear about your story. I'm just curious for any of you that are been working on NPSP for a long time or even new to the NPSP reporting journey. And if you might have some goals that you might share, it certainly would help Daniel to reflect on those as he's speaking today. If any of you would like to click on the raise hand, we can take you off mute. Just be interesting to hear if anyone wants to share. Maybe we can get Melissa to jump off mute. I'm sure she'd be great. How's it going, Melissa?
Great, David. How are you?
Just like, sorry to put you on the spot. It's great to have you with us.
No, I'm excited to be here and excited to see Daniel's presentation. Of course, NPSP reporting is such an important part of everything that I do with all of our customers that I'm always curious how folks are doing that and what they're really looking for. And of course, for me, the importance is being able to show the impact through whatever metrics are being measured and collected and kept. So that's my big question. How do you create a report that goes beyond just showing metrics and actually shows impact?
Oh, that's great. And sort of like filling in the story around the data. We're a little limited with that within the system. On reports, we obviously have the description within a report. I think you can type a couple of sentences. It's probably 255 characters. And then on the dashboard, we have the header, subheader, and the footer for each dashboard component. We also have the description, but it's still not quite the sort of the what's this really telling us sort of picture that I think you're describing, that narrative around the data.
Right, and some of it may be what data you're collecting. I mean, I know traditionally volunteer hours has been a huge data collection point, right? But what does that tell us? Volunteer hours, how does that actually translate to impact that your nonprofit is making in the community?
I love that. Yeah, there's a lot of focus, and NPSP is designed so well around donations and cultivation and donor stewardship, but there's also through NPSP and other add-ons, how do you measure the impact of your organization, your service delivery? And so I can reflect and probably share about examples of dashboards that include both, the money and the people impact.
Yeah, well, that's great. Would anyone else like to share what they're up to with NPSP reporting? Thank you, Amber.
Hello. So I'm really new to the NPSP territory and even newer to reports and dashboards. What I'm working on currently is creating our end of year lists and our end of year data points for our end of year appeal and annual report at the beginning of next year. So creating reports and dashboards that, just like the earlier person said, reflect the whole story financially and impact wise.
Oh, that's great. So incredibly important. One of the things I'll talk about in a little bit is using cross filters and thinking of the end of year appeals to reach out to people who might have given in the past but haven't given this year. And that's sort of, I know Daniel talked about that in the last session that we did as well, but so incredibly important. Awesome. Would anyone else like to share? I think Joshua traded emails with me earlier today talking about dashboards and talking about trending and historical trending with NPSP. Hey, Joshua. I don't know if you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm on mute.
Hi.
Yeah, my company, although it's a nonprofit, but we switch from nonprofit to the enterprise version. So I don't know if this suits me or not. So we don't have much experience with this. We are, since the beginning, I think we are not using this a nonprofit way. So in the end, we found that we are not using that, and that NPSP is not suitable for our business model.
Okay, and that can certainly be true. And then some of these concepts will apply and some of them won't apply, but hopefully there'll be some nuggets for you in the session today.
Yeah,
really glad to have you with us today. So what we thought to do today is bring Daniel back and have hit him with a bunch of questions. So look forward to that. Then we thought to pick out a couple of topics, and really these are just techniques to just ensure that whether it's reporting permissions, that your users have enough power within the system. It's amazing with the move to Lightning how many things, how many reporting permissions are just not granted out. In fact, only 4 out of 30 possible reporting permissions are given with the standard user profile. So if you clone the standard user profile and gave that to your fundraising team, they really don't have a lot of reporting tools, and maybe there's a super user there. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about cross filters. I want to spend some time on custom report types and one very specific feature that allows you to essentially flatten the database. You can go to that lowest level item like a payment and then reach up through the database and pull fields from various objects. In fact, you can pull fields from 60 objects up to 5 levels above and pull them down into that one level, and it really makes reporting easier. Daniel will talk to us about the customizable rollups that come with NPSP, which are super powerful. We thought to have a little bit of a group discussion. So if you have any best practices that you didn't hear during the session today that you'd like to add, that would be amazing. We'll talk also a little bit about future Dojo topics. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? All right, Daniel. So where should someone start? We have some people that are new to reporting with NPSP. What would make sense for a starting point for someone?
Yeah, that's a great question. For a starting point, I always recommend first, explore what's out of the box. NPSP has dozens of reports and a few dashboards that have been set up, with input, likely from the community, where you can see the different types of information that's possible to put in and get out of your system. Also, it helps, the imagination of how you might extend them, and also not reinventing the wheel. There may already be a report that gets your team up and running with the information they're looking for, and maybe you go in and tweak a filter, or you might add a few fields. But definitely knowing, and there's a report workbook out there that we can provide a link in the chat that gives, what is available for you already to then extend and make that your own. The second piece of advice is around the data model. So we have, the core Salesforce platform and Sales Cloud pieces, and NPSP extends that and adds on objects that are important for nonprofits. And so by exploring that, you really understand how the information that is already configured with NPSP, that of course you can extend, would help you, with your reporting goals and the activities that you want to do with your team. So there's another link we can post about the ERD, the data model, that the Salesforce team has done a wonderful job updating, where they can, you really want to get a glimpse of how information relates to each other, because it's going to really help you choose how to structure your reports. One of the first questions when you create a report is, what report type do you want to use? And so through this session, we could show you, by understanding that data model and what's available out of the box, where do you start? Like, where's that core object that's going to give you a lot of what you want, and then maybe bring in information from others. So spend time definitely studying that and being familiar with it. And then I always like to design both the data itself and the reporting with the questions in mind that the business wants to answer. So we heard some comments earlier about being able to measure impact and being able to measure fundraising and different activities. What are those questions that you're looking to answer? You might want to know, who is our top donor? Who are our top grants and foundations? You might want to know who hasn't given this year, who was a major supporter last year. Maybe they just haven't had a chance to renew their commitment yet, or they're waiting for a phone call. So definitely start with those, the data and the reporting questions in mind you have.
And those questions, Daniel, I know when you and I were speaking before, you mentioned the idea of like, those make such a good description for the report. When we were given that ability to have the 255 or so characters in the report description when we save it, and to actually put the question that's being answered is such a nice practice.
And extending on that, someone within my org had put in the actual business question in the report descriptions, and I thought, this is amazing. So without opening up the report, people can see this report is expected to answer, who are our top donors for this period of time? Great. So when I'm looking for that, I know I can open that report and exactly what it's designed to answer. And now, of course, I can extend it and answer other questions. But definitely knowing that in mind is going to be helpful as a starting place.
Sure. Oh, that's great. And so Kyle, I think you've got some of those links to share in the chat. Thank you for doing that. Daniel had referred to a couple of different resources that would be great for somebody who's starting out. Daniel, how can report writers get at the data? So like the data is sloshing around in there. You mentioned the standard objects, you mentioned some custom objects. How can they get at the data?
Yeah, so I like to think of having a set of reports that your partners, the people within the organization, have sat down with you and have said those questions, right? Those business questions, the top ones. And you have the reports that you design and build to answer those questions. And then you put them in a folder, and you make them a folder that's probably read-only, but it's a core set of reports that have been vetted, they're designed, they have the right filters in place, the right bits of information, and they are designed specifically to answer those questions. Now, again, with those, you can extend them. So there will often be ad hoc questions, or the questions you are using for that report for might open up other questions and observations that you want to learn. But have a set of those reports that you've worked with the team to design to meet their needs. I think training is huge here, and I like to think of reporting admins and super users. We'll talk a little bit about permissions in a moment, but I think that's important to empower those that are closest to the data with the training that they need through Trailhead, through NPSP specific training. Get into that Lightning report builder and show them how it works. Start with those pristine reports. Start with, having everyone understand the data that's available to them. And then they will then become the super users that help their peers know when and where to go for the reports they need. And then lastly, we'll get into customizable rollups. So there are times when, you don't want to bring in all the detail. You're really trying to answer basically an aggregate or a summary kind of question. How much does this donor give? How many gifts? What was their largest gift, the smallest gift? Leverage these features so that it makes your reporting life easier. Now, of course, if you need the detail that goes behind it, you can also build those reports. But sometimes you just want, the summary or to track how those trends are going. So that's another key feature. NPSP is amazing. I can't wait to show you more about it. And there's an amazing workbook out there for that too. But know those rollups.
Yeah, I went ahead and dropped those links into the chat. And we'll talk about rollups a bit more in a little bit. So Daniel, what are some other things on your mind when reporting? Yeah,
I mentioned a little bit about the training. I think that's key to those that maybe haven't seen Lightning, or they haven't seen the NPSP reporting yet, or they have a skill and they want to learn more advanced tricks. So I think of that. Dashboards with filters, in my opinion, is one of the underutilized features. So for example, if you're an organization, you've got 100 chapters around the country, you can have a dashboard with a filter for a location, Boston, Chicago, Florida, whatever you want. And then the underlying reports that drive that dashboard will be automatically filtered. And that gets people out of having to maintain those same sets of pristine reports for each one of their locations. So there's just so much amazing power.
One comment on that, Daniel. So each dashboard filter is limited to 50 entries. An entry could reference a single location, or maybe there's like a New England set of locations. You can actually bundle, have one of your 50 entries in the filter reference multiple locations, just separated by commas. But there's nothing stopping you from having two filters on the same field on the same dashboard. So a single dashboard can have up to 3 filters, and you can actually reference the same field twice. So Daniel's example of 100 locations, if you really wanted to filter on 100 locations, you'd actually have 2 filters, each with 50 entries to make that happen on the dashboard.
Yep. Some other things that come to mind is, this gets into the data architecture and the system setup. There are times when you're going to constantly need an answer. Maybe you're on the opportunity object and you want to bring in something from the account, and you are constantly doing that in your reporting. Well, then it's time for either, as we'll show you a little bit later on, adding that field to a report type, or adding it if they need to see it when they're on the record as well as a formula field. Versus this is just a one-off, so I'm going to just add it specifically for this report type. So I think it's important just to figure out how to set up and optimize the information that people need. And often people don't just need one object worth of information. So again, working with your team and figuring out, okay, I mostly want to look at an account report, but maybe I also want to pull in, something else. I think retention policy is important. There could be thousands and thousands and thousands of reports. I know I create a lot in my private folder, and it takes a habit to go through those. And I love that Lightning could show us the last time they were run, especially with the public report folder that everyone has access to. Have a way to clean that up and encourage people to do that too. And then we're going to talk about cross filters. I think that's yet another area where I don't need the information from those other objects, but I want to be able to filter by them. So those are some of the other things that come into mind with reporting.
Yeah, and to your idea of being able to see the last run date, we can certainly create a report on reports. If we create a custom report type, we can create a report on dashboards. And so if you're walking into an organization that's been around for a decade and has thousands of old reports, there is a way to sort of list them out and be a little organized cleaning them up. Yeah, great. All right, Daniel, what are some other, walk us through some NPSP considerations?
Yeah, and this gets back at the data model and knowing the report so you can see, how these all relate to each other. A common question that comes up is, when would I report at the opportunity level? So, you have a pledge, you have a donation, you have a grant that's coming in the payment level. So, okay, someone's pledged $1 million, but they're going to pay it over 10, $100,000 payments. And which you use depends on, again, the reporting question. It may be, how much did we win for a pledge this year? Okay, so that might be opportunity for the $1 million. But then it's, well, what's really in the bank? Or what payments can I expect coming in? And so then maybe you'd want to be at the payment level. It also depends, I've seen it depend on the accounting system. Do you recognize pledges within that fiscal year right away? Or can you only recognize cash payments that have actually come in? There's actually a check or something in the bank. So that's one thing that constantly comes up, and they're both valid to report at both levels. And I think it's helpful to empower your team to know where would they go for which question that they're trying to answer. The second consideration is there's a lot of power behind crediting people for donations. So there's hard credits, the donor who made, whose name is on the check, who made the donation, and the actual other people who are supporting that. It could be a board member, it could be, a friend or someone who's connected with an organization that every time, a donation's made that you want to give credit. And they both, again, answer different questions, and you can combine them together if you just want to know the grand total as well. So I think the distinction of knowing that, and I'm going to give you one example. So donor advised funds, some organizations, the donor that gets hard credited is the one writing the check. But behind that check could be one or multiple donors that you would want to soft credit so that you can give them credit because they're the ones that you're stewarding. They're the ones that are part of your community. Similarly, I would say soft credits versus allocations is another topic to dive into. So soft credits is about people with that particular donation that you want to credit. But allocations get at typically things like, for example, I want to take that $1 million and spread it across 5 of my different locations. The donor asked, to make sure that we split the money up that way, or by different years or different projects. So, one's more people-based, the other one might be more sort of how are we allocating that money to the donor's wishes. And then I would say, when do you report at the household versus the contact is very common. A lot of organizations, I think, despite who writes the check at the contact level, they're stewarding the entire household or the organization. Both reporting needs are very valid. And I heard questions with annual reports and such. And so figuring out sort of your rules for, who do you want to recognize and what type of information you're pulling out. Maybe you're doing a mailing list. And so NPSP has the ability to create a household mailing list. Or maybe you just want to reach the primary contacts of those households or those organizations. And then finally, there's a lot of power in automation and understanding how it works. There's amazing Salesforce documentation on this. But I'll mention that when you're creating an affiliation between a person and an organization, you can have that person be credited every time the organization gives. Or you can create a relationship between 2 contacts, 2 people. And every time, for example, a board member's friend gives, the board member gives that credit. So those are some of NPSP specific considerations that I see and themes that play out over and over.
All right, last question, Daniel. I would like to know, can you give us an example of a dashboard that's helped you run an org?
One of my favorites is, and it's not always user facing, but I actually think it's great to empower your teams with this too. So there are sometimes, exception dashboards are one of my favorite. And there are sometimes a need to make sure that, hey, there might be information that's missing that might not be obvious. You want to try to catch it as people are putting the data in. But sometimes, having the dashboard do it, I like, these are gauges that typically you want the values to be 0, like there are 0 exceptions. It's great. And run that, schedule that, show your teams how to reference it. I had this come up with, different types of, hey, scenarios where if this is seen in the data, we want to show that to someone to get it corrected, because again, the reporting that people are relying upon is as good as the data that's put in. So I think if you have key pieces of information or situations where, it's important to know if that information might need a correction. I love the power of exception dashboards, where you then have the reports underneath each gauge, right? So if you see a 1 or a 2 records need correction, you can click in, see what the issue is, and then everyone's assured that kind of the reports that are driving that, are accurate.
That the data is clean. Yeah. So, for a lot of the sales organizations we work with, having an open opportunity with a close date in the past, it's like a cardinal sin of forecasting. And that might be, how many open opportunities with close dates in the past. Similarly with a donation, it doesn't quite make sense that the close dates in the past, even though the donation is still open. So any of those things. And probably another piece to that is because a dashboard can have up to 20 components, some of these might just be either metrics, which are quite condensed and can really be quite small on a 12-column dashboard, that you don't really need a lot of space to show quite a bit of information for this type of exception dashboard.
And a question comes up, so why do we need it to begin with? Couldn't we put validation rules and other things in place? That's true, you could. It also gets at training, but sometimes you don't want to impede the process, but that there's a small chance that this particular thing could come up. And so you'd rather monitor it that way than stop users in their workflow. So there's always a trade-off no matter what you do in designing a system like Salesforce. And sometimes it's good to say, well, we're going to monitor for this and teach people to monitor these dashboards themselves. And then that helps us with training. Like, hey, this pattern is coming up a lot. Could be one user, could be a team. Let's address that rather than
that's such a good
throw
point.
another rule in the system that locks people out from doing what they need to do.
Yeah,
there's a trade-off.
Yeah, and even hearing someone like Amber talking about end-of-year reporting, it makes me think, not all reports and dashboards are consumed on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. Some are back of house, and I think of an exception dashboard as being a little bit more back of house than something that might be end user focused. But I love that idea of it reinforcing training.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, this is awesome, Daniel. Just a ton of knowledge there. We thought to shift gears and just talk about a couple of other very specific topics. One of them being around granting users reporting permissions. So if you've seen me present before, you've probably heard me talk about this blog article I wrote 100 years ago now for Salesforce. And I looked through, counted up, I think there are 30 report and dashboard permissions on a profile, and only 4 of them are set by default on the standard user profile. And what that means is if you have people that should be super users with reporting, you're probably going to want to have someone either update the profiles or create a permission set. So if you're not an admin, you might need to bring this to someone's attention. I've got a bit.ly link here. We can drop that into the chat window. It's just bit.ly/report_permissions here. But just to show you this in the system, and I imagine you can see my screen, Daniel?
Yep.
Okay, great. And it's probably on a 34-inch screen. It's probably a little small. So I'm under setup. This is a place where admins go, and I'm under users and permission sets. So each user has a profile that gives them it controls what they see and what they can do with what they see, essentially in the system. How the screens look and that sort of thing. So we could either update individual profiles, or we could create a permission set that lays on top. Each user has one profile. Each user could have many permission sets. But one of the permission sets we might grant could be report and dashboard super user. And it's very easy to create for an admin. So if I come into here, click the new button for the permission set, I'll call this report and dashboard super user. And I'll spell it correctly, and I'll go ahead and save that. And now we're into something that looks like how we manage profiles. And if we go under setup, and on the permission set, if we go under system permissions, and then we edit this, we can literally scroll down through, and there are hundreds of boxes here. This will just be blank. This is again going to lay on top of the profile. Permission set doesn't restrict, it really just adds additional. So we might come in here, and if somebody's going to be a super user, we probably want to allow them to change the dashboard colors. So in Lightning on a dashboard, we can have 14 color palettes. A super user cannot change the dashboard color or make it a light or dark theme if you don't give them this permission. We might want to allow them to create and customize dashboards. We might want to allow them, out of the box, they already have create and customize reports, and so on. There's quite a few of the 30 under subscribe. And if we go down here, subscribe to reports is already set by default at the profile level, but subscribe to dashboards is not. So each user, if you allow them to, can subscribe to up to 5 dashboards and have them sent out via email, which I think is a cool thing. I don't know why that wouldn't be set by default, but that's that blog article is just bit.ly. See if I can spell that correctly. Normally I have it open. Here we go. Bit.ly report permissions. And let's get that copied and go to the page. So here's the, and what I did was just organize this via 5 different groups of users. So your end users, what they might be given, what managers might be given, what a super user might be given. You know, if you're not an admin in your system, there are permissions that you probably should have if you're going to be a super user for reports and dashboards. And that's what I've talked about here. So I'm going to drop that into the chat and we'll keep going. That's the bit.ly link in the chat. All right, so the next topic I think is super valuable is just understanding not only custom report types. So when you buy Salesforce and you start using it, there are maybe 75 or so standard report types. When you install the NPSP that managed package, there are additional ones. Well, we can create even more report types. So what is a report type? It's essentially a data foundation that once you've created it, or once an admin has created it, other users can create reports on it. So why is this important? Well, there are more than 50 things that you can't report on any other way unless an admin or somebody with admin-like permissions creates a custom report type. So a really basic example of that is we can't create a report on all of our dashboards unless somebody creates a custom report type for it first. There are some special things about custom report types. We can specify which objects, we can specify the joins, we can specify the fields that are available, we can relabel fields, we can specify which ones are selected by default, so a bunch of things. But there's one more super powerful thing with report types that I want to talk about with relation to NPSP, which is this additional feature that a lot of people don't find, where we can add fields to the report type that are related to the report type's primary object via lookup. So, and you can go up 5 levels. So an example here I have on the screen is the payments object, which is part of NPSP. So a payment is associated with an opportunity. That opportunity is associated with an account. That might be a household or a donor or something. That account has an owner. That owner could be the fundraiser who's managing the relationship, and so on. And we could pull fields from that owner and pull in their mobile phone number, essentially down into this payments custom report type that we're creating. So the way that we do that is we create a custom report type, in this case, creating it on the payments object. And then when you edit the layout on the payments report type, there's a link here. And I wish this had I wish it was more prominent because a lot of us just don't use this. But it says here, add fields related via lookup. And you can add up to 1,000 fields, and you can add fields from up to 60 related objects. They're from that low level like payments up above in the object, the data model, we can pull those down, and you can go up 5 levels. So it's really, really powerful to pull fields in and essentially flatten the database. Evan Ponter has written about this quite a bit on the reportforce.blog, and I've got the link here, just literally reportforce.blog. But to show you this in the system, if I come back in here and where did I put it? Okay, so we're in setup, and if I go in setup under analytics, reports and dashboards, report types. So we have the standard report types, which we don't see here. We have here a list of custom report types. It looks like Daniel created a bunch of these earlier in the year. And then we have one that I created last night called payments. That's what the screenshot was. If I click on that payments report type, I can see the definition. This is a report type that's just based on the payments. So by default, it would only have payment fields. It would really only have payment fields on there. But if I come down here and edit the layout, you can see what I've done here is kind of special. I've created 2 new sections and I've pulled in associated opportunity fields. So a payment is associated with an opportunity, and I've pulled in a couple of specific fields there. So that's one of the 60 objects that I'm allowed to pull from. So I pulled in the account name, the amount, the close date, and the stage of the opportunity. I've also reached up to the associated account, which is another level above. So it's from payment up to opportunity, opportunity up to account. And the way to add additional fields here is just to go ahead and click on the link here, add fields related via lookup. And so I can choose, there aren't that many objects associated with payments. If you were to pick something in your own system, there might be an example that has many, many lookup fields that you can pull in many, many different things. In my system, that would be the time object. We track time in Salesforce and we have lookups to all these different objects, and we can pull fields in to display on reports. So if I go into opportunity, you can see here the fields I've already selected, and maybe I can reach up to, so there's batch, contract. So you can see all the ones that have, so here's a matching gift object, and I could pull in related fields from that. I've got other fields related to campaigns. If you're using that, you've got recurring donations and so on. So this is behaving a little oddly here, but just show adding another field. So let's say I wanted to pull in the not the opportunity. How about the matching gift status? And I want to pull that in. I can go ahead and do that. You can see it gets added to the top section. If I want to put that in a new section in my report type, I can go ahead and create a new section and give it a name. I'll just call that matching. It gets added to the bottom. I can drag and drop and put this field down here. If I click on the field, I can see and it's very, very small here, but I can see from payments up to opportunity up to matching gift. And I can see the matching gift status. So you can relabel this. It doesn't have to be quite so long. I could also include this by default if I wished. I won't do it in this case. So now that I've updated this custom report type, now I can go create a report using it. So if I come back to the reports tab, and on the reports tab, if I go to create a new report, and I put that particular report type under the opportunities category. And if I scroll down, I can see it down here. Here's that payments. And what I want to point out is that what we're able to do now is pull in any of those fields that we pulled in because we put them on the custom report type. A nice way to see them is to use this, the caret here, bump out all the fields. And you can see my 39 payment fields, my 4 opportunity fields, my account fields, and my matching. Here's the one that we just added, the matching gift status, and it's available immediately to, if there's information there, it'll be displayed. So I think it's really, really powerful, especially on the lower level objects that have lots of parents, to be able to pull the data in and essentially flatten things out. All right, so the last thing I'll talk about now is cross filters. If you haven't played with these, this is one of the most powerful things that you haven't played with. Salesforce actually got a patent on this concept to be able to add a filter with or without child records. So you can create a report on the parent object and just that object, like let's say accounts, and maybe we want to do households without donations this year. Well, we can use cross filters and also cleverly use sub filters. And you can see in my screenshot here, we're looking at accounts and we see accounts without opportunities because that's where our donations are stored. And we're saying without opportunities where 1 equals true and the close date is this year. And anytime you add a cross filter, it's essentially adding it as an and with your other filters. It's really an and to the report type itself. So this report is on accounts, and we're saying, and I want ones without opportunities with a close date that's 1 this year. So you can have up to 3 of these per report. Each cross filter can have up to 5 sub filters. This is where it gets insanely cool. So some examples of these would be household which hasn't given this year, a donor with at least 1 major gift would be another one, a pledge without a payment, stuff like that to be able to pull your, so Amber mentioned earlier, preparing for end of year sort of call outs, and maybe you don't want to ask someone for more money who's already given $1 million to the organization this year. So you might cleverly use cross filters. So back in our system, I've got an example of this opened up, make it a little larger on the screen here, but this is a report on accounts. So I have nothing up my sleeve. This is only a report on accounts, but essentially with the cross filter, we're filtering on the existence or the lack of a child record. In this case, the child record is opportunities, and we're saying not just any opportunities, but opportunities that are won this year. And these are the sub filters that are added there. So super, super powerful. I hope you all get to try these out. Daniel, can you take us through customizable rollups?
Yeah, and those are truly amazing features. So what I love about customizable rollups is they extend. In Salesforce, we can have rollups. There are apps that do rollups, but baked right within NPSP, there are a variety of different types of rollups that we have out of the box. There's over 80 of them. And you may decide, you want to use them or keep them all, or only show certain ones on the page layout and keep the rest of reporting. It's definitely one of those key decisions, but just study them and see how they work and play with the data that you have and those reporting questions that you're trying to answer, because you may find that, for example, you could mostly run an account report, just as an example, and to be able to get at the first gift, the last gift, the average gift, and the power too of this, and I'll show you a little behind the scenes of this in a moment. You may also say, I want to be able to click into the largest donation that this person ever made. So you're right on their account. And this type of feature can go and grab that information from that first, that last, that most donation, and also put that front and center for everyone. So they don't even have to open up that other record if they don't want to. But it can also be one click away. So they don't have to scroll through, a related list of donations just to get right back to that key moment in the donor's history. You can easily create new ones, play around in a sandbox. Don't be afraid to tweak it and, go back, to the data in your system and see how these rollups play. And as I mentioned, the bullet points here, there's the aggregate type that are looking across all of your records. Give me the total gifts this person or this organization have made. And then those single results, like I want you to go find that biggest gift and give me information about it. And I think it also helps with, my understanding of the design of this, it helps with the performance of the system too. And for you as report writers and super users to be able to get at the information that's in your system.
And Daniel, is it any time a child record is updated, are those immediately recalculated?
There are overnight jobs that handle the customizable rollups. There are, for example, like your hard credits, pretty instantaneously. The soft credits are another example of something that would run overnight. And they can be asked for on demand, so if you don't want to wait. So it just depends on the type of rollup. And there's also jobs that run, and they can be, triggered on demand. If you put in a huge volume of data at 11 o'clock in the morning, you want to see that result more instantaneously.
Yeah. So, it's an important data point to know, because you may be really reporting on data as of 2 a.m. last night versus, 15 minutes ago.
And just to quickly share a screen and just show you a little behind the scenes. All right. So first, I'm bringing up this article with a huge shout out to the Salesforce team, especially Salesforce.org team. So they have an amazing overview and rich information about how this feature works. And here's where they were explaining the types of rollups. There's also content on Trailhead. That's what I love too, is that you have both types of learning materials and they complement each other very, very well. But you get into concepts like earlier we were talking about, well, what's a hard credit versus a soft credit? And how do you enable and set up this feature? But to show you a little behind the scenes, there is an NPSP setting you get to through your waffle. Okay. And when you go to NPSP settings, I'll show you this. It does take it a quick moment to load.
I love that we're seeing how the sausage is made here.
And these are very powerful settings. Often once you kind of configure them, you can likely, leave them. But there are, for example, here's those bulk data jobs. If you want to rerun some of these different types of things, there are other sort of batch overnight jobs that run as well as part of NPSP. But under donations, you have this customizable rollups. Okay, so it's already configured. It's already on for this org, and it replaces a feature that was there before. And I think it's very, very powerful. And I'm just going to show you an example. So we have this account average gift. Okay, it's targeting the account where we want to put this information, but where are those detail records? Well, I want you to go look at all the opportunities that relate to that account and find the hard credit scenario. And I want you to give me the average. And in filter groups, it's really a cool way of you can say, yeah, well, I only want it for this particular year or for this, particular set of criteria. So you can define these groups and apply and know that you could literally hand this to your users too and say, well, that all these rollups function similarly with the filter group. This is one opportunities that are hard credited. Beautiful. So I click in and it's just really cool. I won't spend too much time, but I just play around, see what's available. Okay, so I can I can put my roll up on the account, the contact, or these other two objects. Okay, you can create, and I love the help text here too. Okay, so where is it that we're going to put this information? We have a field called average gift out of the box. Here's that operation it's going to perform. Is it going to find the smallest, the largest, the first, the last? The average, or sometimes, and I love this feature too, give me the best year, total. Here's where you get at, a little bit of the time frame aspects. So you can say, how many days back, for example. And then you have your different types of rollups. So it says here the combination of which object you're rolling up and whether it's a hard or a soft credit. So they got these different types of rollups. Here's where we get at, you see there's payments here. So sometimes out of the box, some organizations keep a lot of the opportunity to account rollups. But again, if your accounting system is, I want to see that payment, what's the actual money that's been paid, or that we expect, they enable that type of rollup for you too. And again, the filter groups is where you could really define your criteria of, okay, I want you to search all the records in the database, but only those that meet the specific criteria are what I want you to roll up. In one of the orgs I'm working with, we just gave everyone this dictionary. You should really empower people with, these are the rollups. This is what they do and where they pull from. Here's what is included in the rollup and here's what's not. So that when people are making their decisions about which one of these rollups are going to help them answer their business question, and you might even write that out. Here's this rollup answers this business question. They have these 80 plus, and you can keep extending it.
Yeah, I saw the 87. Yeah, that's amazing. That's so cool.
Really, really powerful feature. You can explore. This is again back to data model. Explore. Kind of check in on some of these and see what's already available for you. It's really, really, really awesome.
Well, that's so cool. Thank you, Daniel. And so for anyone who's not really sure what we were just looking at, we can make adjustments to the structure of the data model within the NPSP. These rollups have been given to us to support our reporting efforts, and I love that we can modify them. I mean, it's so great. So we're not reporting goes on top of this amazing, and you don't have to use all of them. You can pick and choose which ones that you want to take advantage of. That's so incredibly powerful. Well, great. Thank you, Daniel. I'll go ahead and grab that back. And so I'm curious for the group, any tips that anyone would like to share? Interesting to hear if any of you have anything you've seen valuable with NPSP reporting, something that's been helpful to you, a blog or anything that's been useful.
Hi, it's Amber here. This is a bit of a hijack and I apologize. I do not have any tips. I have a question for the group.
Okay.
I have a highly customized NPSP and the reports out of the box are not going to work for my instance. I need to reverse engineer how my data is related to each other. Does anybody have any tips on how to investigate that?
Yeah, so we actually put in the chat earlier, there's the ERD. And I'll go ahead and click on the link since I'm still sharing. We'll pull that up. And what do I have to, oh, it's a PDF, I see. So there's a PDF of the data model. And this is very, very helpful for understanding how things are connected. This looks like a little bit like a rat's nest, I think, but at least understanding if you've looked at an ERD before, seeing many-to-one relationships, object to object, how they're connected, and maybe able to help you sort of target how am I going to get at that data that I need. So there's quite a lot going on here within the data model.
There are also tools out there, off the top of my head, of course I'm blanking right now, but also within the setup menu, you can get at the objects that are in your org. So you mentioned there were some customizations. So you can use those tools. There's some free ones out there. And then also right within the org, you can look at your data model and see how they relate.
The schema builder.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
that's the word I wanted.
Yeah, so what Daniel's talking about is within the org, you've got another tool that's a bit more dynamic for your org. It's called the schema builder. So if you go under setup and in that top left search under setup, type in the word schema, you can find the schema builder. What's nice about it is that you can select the objects that you want to see. Right now we're seeing accounts and assets, but I could add another object in here. We could see campaigns, for example. And now campaigns has nothing to do with and I'd have to zoom out and sort of move this tool around, but it's basically meant to look at lots and lots of objects at the same time. So there's a little bit of cleanup too, and this is where the auto layout can be helpful, sort of move things closer. But what we could see is, campaigns is completely unrelated to assets and accounts, whereas assets is very much a child of accounts. So there's quite a bit of data points here. So this would be useful. And you mentioned heavily customized, Amber. This would be useful to you in just trying to map out like how are these things related or not related. Like campaigns is completely unrelated to assets and accounts, and we can see that directly here.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you guys.
Sure. Any other thoughts anyone wants to share from something they found useful with in support of your reporting on NPSP? All right. So Daniel, thank you so much. Awesome to have you back in the dojo. It seems like you've actually never left the dojo because you've been to so many of the sessions, and I'm so glad that you've done that. Today we talked about quite a lot, Daniel, with covering so many topics with NPSP reporting. We talked about reporting permissions, cross filters, custom report types with that special feature. If you edit the layout, the ability to look up to parent objects and pull a value in. So once that's saved, people can create reports and see data from different objects. So that might be something else that might help Amber out. But the objects have to be connected, and you're going from a child up to a parent, and you can go up 5 levels and pull in data from 60 objects. It's really quite powerful. Daniel also talked through the customizable rollups, which is yet another amazing. So thank you, Kyle, for putting those 4 links. Those are really super resources for reporting in NPSP. Anyway, for upcoming sessions, so on the 27th, we'd love to have you back for reporting and dashboard features that are new in the year 2021. We have 2 significant ones that have gone live as beta in the winter 22 release that is just gone live. They both require a checkbox to enable, so we'll go through those. One of those is inline report editing, which is kind of exciting. The other has to do with dynamic gauges, but there are other features that have been released this year. We'll just go through them. On the 10th of November, we'll talk about reporting on time. This is kind of an interesting thing, because a lot of objects have dates and open dates and close dates. And then there are specific time objects that many of us have to literally log time, whether it's volunteer hours or things like that. So we'll talk about different aspects of reporting on time. On December 1st, we'll do a year-end show and tell. So I'd love to get some people to volunteer to show things that they've worked on. And then on the 15th, and this might be also related to what Amber is up to, sort of the year-end, you're talking about planning year-end notes, but, a lot of us need to do year-over-year reporting. Did we do better than last year? What was the growth percentage-wise? Did our donations increase over year, that sort of thing? So all these are available. You can register on dashboarddojo.com. We also, oops, didn't mean to click on that link. That's too funny. We've got a couple of training classes I'll be teaching next week from the 18th to the 22nd, our 5-day Salesforce admin class. I've also got a 2-day reporting workshop coming up on the 2nd and 3rd. These are all virtual from 10 to 4:30 Eastern each day. And that's available on the OpFocus site at opfocus.com/training. And you can follow Daniel on Twitter at SF Trailblazer. I'm also active on Twitter at David P. Carnes 3. So we're so glad that you guys joined us today. See if there are any final comments in the chat. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really just really great. OpFocus is also hosting a webinar on reporting to the board. Some of you may need to prepare data, and whether it's for a nonprofit or for another organization, a for-profit organization, some of you have to do that as part of your work. On the OpFocus site under events, we have the session tomorrow, and it looks like Kyle just put that into the chat as well. We'll have 2 amazing panelists join me to talk about preparing data and the process of it and the storytelling to present to the board. So thank you all for joining us today. Hope to see you back in the dojo. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Be well.